Is in the Quentin Tellis case from Mississippi, which we covered this past year in 2017. As you know, that case ended in a mistrial. The jurors were undecided. They couldn't decide one way or another. Some thought he was guilty, some thought he was not guilty, all in connection with the murder of 19-year-old Jessica Chambers. And they were split. And the reason they were split, well, that's what we're here to show you. We're replaying all clips from this case, including what you see right there is Quentin Tellis' interview tape. And what we're trying to understand today, and which we're analyzing this whole week, is why was the jury hung? Why was there a split? And we'll talk about that a little bit later on today. In the meantime, I want to focus on a new special segment that we're covering today. This is a case out of South Carolina. This guy named James Jimmy Morris, he is a white fire department captain in Columbia, South Carolina. He was fired for posting on social media that he would run over Black Lives Matter protesters if they were still blocking traffic when his shift ended. Now, he's filed a lawsuit against the city of Columbia alleging racial discrimination, namely that he was fired due to his race and that they violated his free speech rights. Process that for a moment. Joining me right now is criminal defense attorney Mark Eiglarsh. Mark, we're here in this case.
Yes.
We're talking about racial discrimination and free speech rights. Are there any merits to either of those claims?
Chutzpah the guy's got, really? You say this, you don't just go away? Look, I'll make the argument for him as best I can, even though I don't think he'll prevail. The argument is there were black people who worked for my department and they wrote the same thing. Why didn't they get fired? Obviously, I'm being singled out because I'm white. The message that I said obviously isn't a problem, or else you would have fired everybody, is his argument. That being said, I don't necessarily agree with it.
Well, let's break that down. What he said was, idiots shutting down I-126 better not be there when I get off work, or there's going to be some run over dumb. You can imagine what he said. He also posted a public service announcement. If you attempt to shut down an interstate, highway, etc. on my way home, you best hope I'm not one of the first vehicles because you're, again, will get run over. Period. That is all. Now, again, that's
Hold
not...
on, Jesse.
Yeah.
Jesse, I got to call you out on it. If we're analyzing what he said and trying to determine whether it's free speech or not, I think that people have an obligation to know what it is specifically that he said. Are we so afraid to say the words that he used? We're reporting it, right?
Right. Well, so, he didn't use any racial terms. He just used he didn't use any racial terms. He just you know, it was nothing like that. I'm just trying to be a little more PC for the viewers, but it was nothing racial. It was not any kind of statement against the Black Lives Matter protesters, anything like that. But the point is that he's basically demonstrating, again, what do we know that this is more, I'm frustrated, I'm making a point, I'm exaggerating what I'm actually going to do, or is it something along the lines of, you know what, you're a firefighter, he was a fire department captain, we hold you to a higher standard, and your free speech rights that you claim you have, this is a job, this is not, your free speech rights are not the same thing as you would have in other situations. Is that the way to tailor it a little bit?
Yeah, here's what I think is really happening here. His supervisors see this as a racial statement and they don't want to have any of it. But it's harder to suggest that it's racial than saying that it's a safety concern, that here's a guy who's suggesting that he would run over someone. And that's contrary to the policy that they have in that department, where they would save people's lives and they're there dedicated to the public regardless of the situation. So that's their non-racial reason for firing him. That's all you need. And I think that's the position that they're taking.
So how would they answer to the fact that if they had other people who made similar comments on social media, I believe there were, I think, 2 or maybe even 3 black firefighters who wrote something and they weren't fired, then how does the city answer to that? Because I think that's a strong point that he makes.
Well, he's claiming that the statements are similar. I've seen a lot of cases where people say, well, they said the same thing. Well, hold on one second. They said the same thing. First thing I'd want to do is I'd want to see what specifically that they allegedly said and see if it really matches up. Because his is very pointed. It's very clear what he's saying. And one could make the argument that the statements might be different. Okay. But, okay, in true Jesse form, you're saying, well, Mark, assume, I already know what you're going to say. Assume that the messages are almost identical.
Right.
Well, they don't have to fire everybody, and they can say that everything matters, all the facts, everything matters, and the fact that he is white and the words that he used all show that this is not something that's consistent with our policy. He violated it.
And I'll add to that, I'm not sure the other people that wrote these comments, I don't know if they were a captain. I don't know if they were his rank. And sometimes if you're at a higher rank, I'd assume that maybe, you're held to an even higher standard and you can't even respond to the same way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're making my point that not every single case is identical. I think you've got to kind of see what the facts are, who are those other people, what specifically they say, when did they say it, and the context.
Mark, I want you to help us out here because we keep hearing this constantly. Free speech rights, free speech rights. His attorney has said the government cannot restrict or otherwise chill individual civil rights. He said, it goes on to say that the First Amendment prohibits firing a government employee for speaking about matters of public concern. This is what his attorney said. We believe this case is important and that we can ultimately prove both a free speech violation and a race discrimination. Free speech. Is that an accurate analysis from his attorney, or is he's puffering that up a little bit?
Well, there's some truth to what he's saying. So again, it's the message. Let's say on his own time, he posted a statement, I am frustrated by these Black Lives Matters protesters, and I wish that they wouldn't block traffic. Let's say he said that. One would argue that's different than, I want to, or whatever he said, I want to make sure they get it right, that he would run over protesters, right, in traffic. Well, hold on one second. The image, if I'm running a fire department dedicated to saving lives, the image that he's creating is inconsistent with what I'm trying to promote. And so you don't have to get to, was it racial, is he anti-black? The issue is he seems to be preserving people's rights to protest. He seems to be pro violence because he's going to run over people. He wouldn't save them. He would cause them harm. And while, yes, I believe that that's people's constitutional right to say those things, there are limits. And your employer can pull the plug if you're violating company policy.
You talked about this, but I'm curious what you think. He says, look, he supports racial equality. He's not against the Black Lives Matter movement. He says, but he thought demonstrating on a public roadway raised safety concerns. Is that a strong argument or not really?
He can make those arguments. He may feel this isn't about, when somebody does a joke and then somebody says, well, you're a racist. The person can say, I have 50 black friends. I'm here. I can look. I was a past president of the NAACP. They can make that argument, but the issue is what they put out there, and in the context in which they put it out there. Does that give your employer a reason, a legal reason to fire you? Should they find that to be offensive and in violation of policy? And the answer, I believe, in this case is yes. Not necessarily because he wasn't exercising his First Amendment rights. I believe that he was, so there's some validation to that argument. I believe he also may not be a racist. Let's just throw that out there. I say that generically. I don't know anything about the guy. But his message was against the message that his own boss is trying to promote, that their firefighters are all about saving people's lives and helping people if they're injured. Going out there and saying that he would be the cause of their harm, he would run over them, that's going to lead to firing all day long if the boss wants to.
Mark, you make a great point. It's not like this guy worked at Walmart and he got fired. He's a firefighter. Yeah. You said it perfectly. He saves lives. So writing a post that goes to the opposite of that, I mean, you make a really strong point there.
But that's it, Jesse. You got it. You got your finger right on the pulse of why I think there's a distinction here. If he said, whatever, we can come up with any other message that doesn't have to that's not contrary to the mission of his office, then maybe he's got a stronger argument.
I gotta talk about what he's suing for. He's seeking unspecified damages for back pay, lost benefits, loss of reputation, and mental and emotional distress. Is that casting a wide net and seeing what you get back?
Yes, and yes, and if he was fired for saying we should ban access to assault weapons, I would probably be more sympathetic and more supportive, because that really doesn't have anything to do with what his company policy is, what they're trying to promote. But that he would run over protesters in the street? And forget about them being Black Lives Matter. They say they're PETA protesters. That the circus, the circus that replaced Ringling Brothers came to town, and they're using the lions and tigers and elephants, and he said, that he would run over those protesters. Again, that would be problematic. That's against what you're trying to promote in that department.
I just sometimes get confused about why people post things before they hit that send button, before they hit that submit button. I just find that fascinating. Whatever job you're in, whatever career you're in, when you put something on social media, you want people to see it. And what do you think the reaction is going to be? Half the time people post things and they're shocked by the reaction. Sometimes I question that too, what goes through somebody's mind before they hit that send button, Mark.
Listen, I do criminal defense work for a living. Every day I'm questioning why people do what they do, but it helps feed my family, so I don't question it too hard. Listen, I'm here defending the guy's right to say what he wants. In fact, if he did say N-words and things like that, that's his constitutional right. Let me make this very clear. I'm not saying anything negative. In fact, I supported the Skokie decision, people marching, claiming that the Holocaust never happened. How offensive is that to my people? But the Constitution gives people the right to spew the most outrageous and offensive speech so that my speech will be there, so my rights are protected. So I defend the rights of people to say the most outrageous and offensive things. And yes, running over protesters who are, talking about Black Lives Matter, yes, I find that to be problematic. I do. But I defend his right to say it. I also defend the right of his employers to decide who they want to have working for them. And if somebody violates the policy through their speech, then they have a right to can them.
Yeah. Well, it's a really great point that you make. I mean, that's what makes this country really great, is the ability to say what you want. But just because you have the right to doesn't mean that there won't be repercussions. Mark, stand by. We have one more case to talk about with you today. It's out of Connecticut, and it involves the nephew of both Robert and Ethel Kennedy, Michael Skakel, who was convicted of murdering Martha Moxley. Stand by. We're going to talk about the update in that case. What we want to do right now is continue playing you those clips from the Quentin Tellis case from that Mississippi trial in 2017. And when we come back, we'll finish up this morning with a very important special segment.